Hey, welcome back. In this part of the series, we are going to talk about arrow functions. An arrow function is pretty much similar to a regular pre-ES6 function expression, but there is still a few differences that we will see a couple of them later on. So, to create an arrow function, we need to declare a variable, again like we would do to create a function expression. However, with arrow functions, we don't need the function keyword anymore. Then we have to type the arrow symbol, which is a combination of the equal and greater than signs, and of course we need a couple of curly braces which will contain the logic of the function. That said, there are a few kind of special cases when it comes to the syntax of arrow functions. As you can see, in both of the cases where we had 0 or 2 or more parameters, we had the parameters wrapped within a couple of parentheses. However, in case we have one single parameter, the parentheses are optional, so we can actually skip them. Now, back to the first example, we have the ability to type everything within one single line. That being said, we can take a step further into making the code shorter, since with arrow functions that can be typed within one line, we can get rid of the return statement and the curly braces, which makes the code cleaner, especially when it comes to array methods, which we'll get into in a second. That leads us to another special case in which a function returns an object. As you see, the function didn't return anything because the curly braces here are acting as the function body delimiters, not as an object. So all we need to do to make use of the implicit return statement is to wrap the object within a couple parentheses. Now let's create an array with some values, then use the map method to generate a new array out of the first one, but with its values multiplied by 2. That done, now let's transform the code to make it use an arrow function instead. So first of all, we need to get rid of the function keyword and the parentheses around the parameter, since we have a single parameter. Then we need to add the arrow symbol. The code is short, so we can actually type the entire function in one line, and therefore we can get rid of the return statement and the curly braces. And there we go, the syntax now looks more clean and concise. A very important thing to bear in mind is the this keyword, because this in an arrow function works different than this in a regular function. So let's create an object with a function that displays one of the object properties. As you see, this in the function's body here refers to the current object which holds the property named A. Now let's try to use an arrow function instead. This time this.a is printed as undefined. It's kinda weird, isn't it? Well, that's because this in a regular function refers to the object that contains it. So when we used this.a at first, it pointed to the property A that belongs to the same object in which the function is defined. An arrow function, on the other hand, doesn't have this, so it borrows it from its lexical scope. In other words, an arrow function takes its this from the function in which it was defined in. In this case, we have a contextless arrow function, so this here refers to the global object instead of obj, and as we have no variable with the name of A in the global object, we got undefined printed in the console. So, to make an arrow function display the value of the property A, we need to define it within a context, in other words, a regular function. Now it works. As you can see, calling the func method is basically calling the arrow function which is defined inside of it. Here's an exercise. Let's create an object within the same object we've been working with. What do you think the output of the child object method func call will be? The right answer is 22, because this within this function refers to the object containing the function, which is child obj. Let's change the regular function into an arrow function. Now, what do you think the output will be? The right answer is undefined because the arrow function here is contextless, so this refers to the global object. Again, let's create an arrow function within the regular function and see if you can find out the right answer. The right answer is 22 because childFunc, which is an arrow function, borrows its this from its parent regular function. Finally, if you remember in the fourth part of this series, we have talked about arguments, which is an array-like object that holds the arguments passed to a function. Well, an arrow function doesn't have an arguments object. However, same as we have just seen with this, an arrow function actually inherits arguments from its parent regular function. And this is it for this tutorial, so make sure to subscribe and I will see you in the next part of this series.